Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar with Dr. Pramath Sinha. A brief introduction about Dr. Sinha. Dr. Pramath Sinha is a pioneering force in the Indian higher education. He's the founder and chairman of Harappa Education, now part of Upgrad, which strives to become India's largest online institution focused on teaching habits and skills critical to workplace success in the 21st century. He's also the founding dean and a member of Executive Board of Indian School of Business and the founder and chairperson of Board of Trustees of the acclaimed Ashoka University. Dr. Pramath has been instrumental in setting up a wide spectrum of change-based higher education initiatives, including a management program for career-oriented women, an entrepreneurship fellowship for the Himalayan region, and a solution-focused design education for the built environment with institutions such as Vedika Scholars Program, Anant National University, and many more. Welcome, Dr. Pramath, to this webinar on AMP Leadership for Self, Others, and Performance.
Thanks, Tanvi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So at Harappa School of Leadership, we believe that effective leadership consists of three critical components: leading self, leading others, and leading performance. In this webinar, you'll gain valuable insights of each of these areas and learn how to become a well-rounded leader who drives results and inspires success. This webinar is also a great opportunity for you to learn more about the Accelerated Management Program, which is a cutting-edge program that equips ambitious professionals with skills and knowledge needed to thrive in today's fast-paced business environment. In addition to leadership, AMP also covers areas such as strategy, marketing, and finance, making it a modern-day MBA for the 21st century. So Dr. Pramath, I came across this interesting report by DDI. It's a global research firm that conducts research in leadership, talent acquisition, and retention. And there were two really interesting data points that stood out for me. First, 55% of CEOs say that developing the next generation of leaders is the top challenge. And second, 84% of CHROs believe that the need to upskill and develop employees will change in the next 10 years. What's your take on what's happening in the industry and the need for upskilling and leadership?
I think there's no doubt that leadership development has always been a priority for organizations and for sort of talent professionals. But what has happened, Tanvi, is that as the challenges and disruptions facing businesses increase rapidly with some of the technological changes and disruptions that are happening, the need for leadership development has become more widespread. Earlier, it used to be that you would talk about leadership development only for people who are in slightly senior positions. You would get to talk about leaders or leadership. In my days, for example, I remember in my career that it was only when I was in my mid to late 30s that people started asking me about my leadership, and I started getting concerned about my leadership capabilities. Till then, it was about just contributing and performing and doing what you are asked to do, doing it well. So I think today what has happened is we are talking about leadership even at the entry level. People want to understand, do you have leadership potential? People want to quickly get you skilled up, not just in technical skills and domain skills, but on your leadership skills. Because the hope is that it's a multi-year journey, and it's not something that you can kind of just inject in people when they get to a certain stage, that you need to start inculcating and nurturing and evolving on your leadership abilities from a very early stage in your life. The sooner you start, the better you will be as you grow older and you progress through the organization. So skilling and leadership development has always been there, but I think while skilling and training and learning and development has become a big priority as things keep changing so frequently, your formal education is clearly not enough. you need much more. I think within that, leadership development has become a very important and critical foundational element. And it's starting at a much earlier stage than it did in my generation of sort of professional managers and leaders.
Right. And thank you so much. So, so what, based on your experience, leadership starts early on. So what are some of the aspects of leadership that early career professionals should start focusing on or should start developing, as they think about progressing in their careers?
If you ask anybody about what is leadership or what aspects of leadership you think are important, each one will come up with their own answer and their own take. Leadership is such a amorphous subject. It's so hard to put your finger on what actually is the most critical element, what is most important. I spent many years trying to figure this out for myself. When I started being asked about, is Pramath a good leader? I started wondering, am I? And what does it mean to be a good leader? And I suddenly realized that if you start describing leadership attributes, easily run up a list of 100 attributes. It's not humanly possible for us to have 100 leadership attributes. Nobody can be like that. So then the question did become the question you're asking, which I would ask I started asking in a different way, which is, what is the most important? What is the critical ingredient? How do you zero in on that? And my explorations led me to the conclusion that, listen, I can't decide whether I'm a leader or not. Usually others decide whether you are a leader or not. People who know you, people who work with you, your subordinates, your peers, your bosses, your clients, generally people who have exposure and engagement with you. So then the question becomes, what do they see in someone to say, oh, this person is a leader? And over the years, I've come to the conclusion that at least at the workplace, maybe not politics, maybe not, other professions, but at the workplace, the most critical and foremost unshakable necessary ingredient is the ability to meet goals, to meet expectations, to deliver what was expected or what you committed to or promised. A lot of people don't realize that it's actually just as simple as that. It's difficult to do that, as you know, and you can't always deliver. You screw up sometimes. You just can't sometimes. There's many things that go into determining whether you are successful or not. But ultimately, it is about delivery. It is about success. It is about meeting the target. And it sounds like a harsh thing to say, because you'd love to say, oh, it's about being inspirational, visionary, it's being about a great communicator. It's about having empathy. It's about being inspirational to your team. All of those attributes are great, but ultimately to do what? If you just had all those attributes, but you were not able to deliver, the world is a harsh place and they will judge you and they will say, yeah, good person, nice person. But you know what? They can't get anything done. So the expectation from the world, first and foremost, is, are you able to give results or not? And so as a young professional, I think the first and foremost important thing is to learn that in any situation, be clear about what are people expecting from you? What exactly are they expecting, and what will constitute success? And then it's almost liberating, because how you deliver that success, of course, you have to deliver it honestly, ethically, but each one of us will deliver the same thing in different ways. You, Tanvi, would choose to do the same task in your way. I would choose to do it in my way. You may be a ace problem solver and you'll immediately solve the problem, and you're so smart that you'll say, okay, this is what we'll do, and you get everybody to do it. I may be not such an ace problem solver, but I may work well through people, and I'll gather some of the best people around me and use them to help me get to an answer. Each one of us will do it differently, and that's fine as long as you are ultimately delivering results. And in the early stages of your career, what people usually call this is accountability. Managers and leaders love people who can be accountable. You give them a task, they deliver it, they do it well, they do it independently, and you give them more tasks and they do it well, and you trust them more and you give them more opportunities. And that's the key thing about leadership in the early stages of your career, which is why one of the key things that I always talk about is leadership is first and foremost about delivering performance, leading performance.
Thank you, Dr. Pramath. We're also open to questions for the participants. If you have any clarifying questions, please feel free to put it on the Q&A. You can also post as an anonymous, question, and we will help you answer that. Dr. Pramath, so you spoke about delivering performance, and you've had so many years of experience, and I've had about 8 years of experience in the industry. And my observation has been that, in my generation, there is a lot of, employees and friends and colleagues shift organizations every 2 years. The main focus, of course, has been on, salary growth. And I think you also spoke about delivering performance. What are some things that professionals in their early career, should focus on? What kind of orientation they should have when they look at career growth? What should be, a guiding framework to define, what does career growth look like? Is it just salary? Is it developing leadership skills? Is it something else?
So Tanvi, I'm going to apologize to all our audience for the next 5 minutes. I'm going through.
Sure.
And the bandwidth just close to my home is a little bit bad. So this may be a bit best audio through. I know people are focused on making money, and all of us should be getting a fair compensation. And if the market is willing to give you more, we try to follow that and optimize and maximize our compensation. But I think the key thing to focus on is what I like to talk about, which is the leading of yourself, which is mainly about personal growth and development. So I think the priority in the early years should be about personal growth and development. What people don't realize is that if you actually look at the arc of your career over most of us are going to, your generation is going to work till you are 70, 80 years old. Your compensation growth is going to be phenomenal. Has to be, will be. It'll be easily 10x, 20x, 40x, 50x of what you start out with. So if you're optimizing for your current compensation and trying to make a couple of lakhs more in your annual compensation, that's great. You should always do that. But what you should be really looking for is opportunities where you learn and grow, and where you will be challenged, which will be the only way you will learn and grow. So the opportunity to be challenged, which tests you and forces you to grow and to improve yourself and upskill yourself, is really what should be the priority. But before I go there, I think what people need to also understand that establishing the track record of performance, like I said, performance is very important. If you move too quickly, then you'll soon end up being in a situation that you've had many jobs, but you haven't delivered at any of them. I have hired recently lots of professionals who've had the kind of career you talked about, where they've spent about 18 months, 24 months in places. But the record, while they may have progressed in roles and responsibilities and their titles and their compensation, the track record of actually delivering stuff, building things, creating things, delivering performance is very poor because they just haven't had the time to demonstrate that. They haven't given themselves the time. So they are smart, they have good credentials, and so companies pick them up, headhunters track them down. They get 25, 30, 40% salary increases and they keep moving from job to job. You optimize for compensation, but you have not really optimized for your personal growth. And that's the trap that you want to avoid. You want to create a track record of building and delivering things. So if people ask you, okay, fine, you were manager of digital marketing at this organization. What were the significant contributions you made? You know how people ask, what were things that you're proud of? What did you achieve? What did you deliver? You should be able to say that about every stint you've had. It doesn't matter how long you've done. To short stints, long stints, you can switch jobs. That doesn't matter. What matters is, did you deliver performance or not? And of course,
Sorry,
the
Doctor.
reason to do that is because you want to be able to not just deliver performance, but also grow yourself personally. Sorry about the disruption. I just reached home and I'll switch to my laptop, but
Sure, we'll wait for another minute. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, feel free to post it on the Q&A section and we'll pick it up.
yeah, Tanvi, while I set up, we can continue.
Great. I see there is a question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll probably answer this later. I think this question is for me. In my 8 years of experience, how would you define leadership at a personal level? I think, well, for me, I am still figuring it out. I think when I made a pivot in my early stages of my career, I realized that there are actually a lot of things that I'm not great at. I'm a quick learner, but I do need a lot more focus. So I think I personally resonate with what Dr. Pramath has been saying and talking about is that, the key focus on developing skills and becoming great at what you do. I think that's been my trajectory in the past 4 years. And I think personally, I've seen, myself picking up projects where I have to develop a skill from beginning. I think Dr. Pramath has also seen that, picking up role in sales, doing things that I've not been comfortable with. So, as of now in my 8 years of experience, that's how I've personally defined my career. I think Dr. Pramath is back, so we'll move the focus back to Sir. But feel free to ask questions. Dr. Pramath is here for the next 40 minutes and we'll be answering all your questions live. Great. So, Dr. Pramath, I have a question for you. there is an industry out there. There is a lot of switch career professionals are making, and the nature of hiring talent retention is changing at a very fast pace. Similarly, we see that there are reports that talk about leadership being one of the core necessary skills and necessary. It's the biggest challenge that the industry is facing. And then we have management education. Since you've been part of, you've seen that shift over the past 2 and more decades of how management education has changed. What is your take on, what's missing in management education, and how are, we at Harappa trying to, change that? We're trying to do something different. We're trying to offer something different in leadership.
Sure. So one of the things that has changed in management education is that the discipline, the profession of management itself has changed. When MBAs and management education was designed, it was designed around these aspects of accounting, finance, marketing, strategy, operations, HR. Somewhere leadership got added to it also. So some business schools usually will teach a course or two on leadership, but most of the courses are about looking at leaders from the past and identifying attributes and saying, oh, this is what a leader is, a good leader is. But I have found that those models don't really work because it's hard to become like some of those leaders. And in fact, people usually highlight the leadership of famous people. And from where we sit, it's like, listen, I'm not going to be Mahatma Gandhi, and there's no point talking about Indra Nooyi. I'm not Indra Nooyi. It takes a while to get to where Indra. So what were some of these people doing when they were younger? And can you not just be an ordinary leader? Is your mother a leader? Is your teacher a leader? And why not? And so how do you think about leadership in a way that is authentic to you, that it means something to you, that you too can have leadership qualities or you can be a leader? And I think that aspect of leadership training is what is actually lacking, because while there is some thinking in some management academics and in some management programs around the world. So for example, the Stanford Business School has this very popular course called the Touchy-Feely course. And they actually make you think about your leadership rather than pointing to famous leaders and saying, oh, become like them. That's the most popular course these days at a business school campus. So I think management education has not quite evolved to make people feel that they can be leaders, that everybody can be a leader, and then how do you go about doing that? I think that's the piece that, in fact, all of Harappa is about. And we've tried to combine that with some of the traditional management education thinking, which you can't throw out the window. So you still need to know finance and accounts and marketing, but you don't need to know it to the extent that it is typically taught in formal programs. You don't need all of that. You don't need to know it in so much depth. I just took a 4-week boot camp before I became a McKinsey consultant. That was all I needed to be really successful as a consultant and actually advise companies on business. But what I really needed more was self-confidence in dealing with difficult clients or dealing with conflict. Often what I had to say, my clients did not agree with. How do you negotiate that? How do you get people aligned? How do you inspire your team? And so on. So I think that aspect of management today needs to include a heavy dose of leadership, because the technical skills are not going to be enough. And I spoke about that in the beginning, that things are changing so fast that, marketing itself has changed. Today, marketing is all about digital marketing and understanding how Google and Facebook and apps and social media works. It's no longer about advertising on television and newspapers. So these professions will keep changing, and the profession will keep changing, and you have to keep up with the core technical aspects of the profession. But the other aspect is that they are going to keep changing so fast that you need to have the ability to constantly keep learning these new things. And that's the meta skill, the power skill that you need to develop. So that's one reason why we've created the kind of programs, and I've tried to infuse a lot more leadership development into even the ISB program when it started, but even most in the AMP program that we have started at the School of Leadership. The other aspect is that there are new subjects getting added to management. Product development is the most sought after role. What is product development? Most people don't understand. Product development in the old days was about designing this mouse, right? And that was this was a product and you designed it. But today, product development has become like almost a daily design, redesign, customer feedback, collecting lots of data, testing things, not waiting to finish, taking inputs from a lot of people. It's almost become like, a traditional consulting role in a company. And it's a most sought after role. So you have to bring in product development, and you have to bring in digital marketing. You have to now learn everybody has to learn how to analyze large amounts of data. In the old days, if there was somebody who was really proficient in Excel on your team, you were fine. You would give them all the problems to do calculations on, and they would. Today, everybody has to learn how to analyze data, interpret data, visualize data, and that's become mainstream. So we've tried to also incorporate all of these technical elements in the programs that we do, so that people are well equipped technically as well as on the leadership skills. But I do want to complete one thought that didn't get covered, because we jumped ahead. And for a minute, we didn't talk about the leading others aspect of leadership. I think as the world has become more and more frenetic and frantic, it has also become much more conscious of bad leaders, and bad leaders in terms of people being jerks as bosses. That's a big pain point. For people like me who oversee some of these bosses, two senior people not getting along because they have such big egos, or they think they have, had a wonderful track record and they know everything, puts a huge overhead on managing any organization. Most of my time goes in resolving conflict between individuals who should actually not be in conflict. They are equally capable. We are all trying to build an organization, but somebody said something to somebody that they didn't like, and this becomes the big part of running any organization. It's too much emotional energy and overhead. Today, therefore, there's a huge premium on leaders who can work well with each other. Leaders who are not toxic. This is a new word that has crept in, right? People talk about the toxic work place. People talk about people with sharp elbows. People talk about people who are jerks, who will always be difficult to work with. And I think there's a real need to make people understand from an early age in their tenure, in their careers, to weed out these behaviors that will get in the ways. People are not conscious, and once you become too old, then it's difficult to change your natural style. It becomes your style. You tend to get irritated and frustrated at the smallest mistakes. And here we are saying, you should tolerate mistakes. Failure is a learning. Well, if your boss doesn't tolerate failures, how will you ever learn? So this aspect of leadership, which is leading others, inspiring others, while you are delivering performance, in today's day and age, you can't only deliver performance and be a jerk as a boss. While delivering performance is a necessary condition, being an inspirational leader who people like to work with is the sufficient condition for leadership. And I think that aspect of it is another thing that we really emphasize in the programs that I've created.
Thank you, Dr. Pramath. I can see a question, two questions from Anand. And I think first one we've covered, which is how do you identify if your boss is a leader? Second, how does a leader solve work politics, especially amongst subordinates?
I think you have to sit them down and give them feedback. Usually what I do is giving feedback is something that we have a whole course on at Harappa. Most people are not taught on how to deal with situations like this. Now, if you have a problem with subordinates doing politics, how do you confront it? You actually sit them down and tell them, listen, I don't want to see any politics at the workplace, and here's why. But we are afraid to do it because we are afraid about their reactions. We are afraid that we call them out, they will see that as criticism, they will take it personally, they will react, their behavior will change, your relationship with them will change, their motivation levels will go down. So I think the first and foremost thing is to understand how to give feedback on difficult issues that can actually be seen as threatening by the subordinates. And there's a way to do that. But other than calling it out, other than helping them understand that it is not productive, helping them understand that it's not collaborative, helping them understand that it is actually impeding their growth at the end of the day, even if the organization is not getting impacted, is extremely important. And you have to set the ground rules. You have to be firm about these things. You have to let people know that you will not tolerate such behavior. At the same time, you have to encourage them to move on and work on more productive things. Obviously, if they're getting into work politics, they have too much time on their hands. Maybe you should give them more work and challenge them so that they don't have time to indulge in politics. Usually the thing about, the idle mind is a devil's workshop, I think is very true at work also. So I think getting people focused on work, like I said, delivering performance, setting expectations with them on what your targets are, but setting expectations on what your expectations of their behavior is. I often tell people that, listen, this is the behavior that you're indulging in. I'd like to see this stop. Here's how you should do it. And honestly, you tell them once. If you see the same behavior again, you tell them again, give them fair warning. And if you see them do this a third time, you ask them to move on. That's how I usually deal with politics at work. It's just too much work to deal with politics. I know it must be very frustrating.
Right, thank you. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. So this person says that they're a mid-career professional who has constantly performed, built, staff delivered outcomes that I'm proud of, that my peers are proud of. However, I feel dissatisfied with where I am. I feel I can do a lot more, add a lot more value. How do I deal with this situation?
Well, it would help to know a little bit of more context. But if you are working in an organization with a hierarchy and you have a boss and you have somebody you report to, I would just ask. Often people don't ask. People expect that they will get recognized, that they will, somebody will naturally ask them to do something or give them more work. I think managers love employees who come up and say, listen, in your words, I think I can do more. I think I can add a lot more value. Which boss will say no to that? Now, understand that you should know whether you have already developed a track record of delivering on performance again. Have you earned the right to ask? Often people think they have earned the right. Often people think they're already adding a lot of value. Just confirm first and foremost that when you say you have consistently performed or that you have built stuff that you are proud of, that is actually recognized and acknowledged. And it's not something that you just have assumed about yourself. Assuming that it's not the case, that people are recognizing it, I would just ask. I have often found that, and when you ask, don't be impatient. Often people ask and then they expect that the organization will respond immediately. And they feel like the organization owes it to them to give a better opportunity right then, right now, because you asked. That makes people, your bosses and others, feel that you are a little bit too entitled. Everybody takes time to figure out, okay, so if Tanvi came to me and said, I want to do more, I would have to be a little bit thoughtful about that. I would like to at least understand, where should I direct her next? How do I do that in a way that doesn't distract from what she's delivering? Because it may not be important to her, but it's important to me that what she's doing continues to be done in the same way. So I do think that this is a good conversation to have, and you should have. You should actually have a very frank conversation to say, listen, I feel like I'm delivering and I have built everything that you asked me to. Do you agree? And if you agree, then I would like to see if there's possibilities for me to do more, to value add more, to stretch myself more. You'll get a reaction. You'll either get a reaction saying, no, I think you need to prove yourself that you're not ready yet. It's premature for you to be thinking about a bigger thing or more. And then you can ask, well, then what? Tell me what your expectation is. I think I've built, but obviously I'm falling short. What else do I need to do to earn the right to be able to do more things? And that's the conversation you need to have with your manager or whoever is going to assign that role. If you are working on something on your own, then all I will say is just try out different and new opportunities. Take on things that you haven't done before. The worst that will happen is that you'll fail. And if you do, you'll go on to do something else. Failure is part of challenging yourself and growing. And the more you fail, the more you grow. So in each of those situations, I think you have to throw yourself against opportunities. And if they're not coming your way naturally, ask. Demand in a good way. I don't mean in a difficult way. Volunteer for opportunities. If volunteer for opportunities outside of your work, if your work doesn't recognize and give you stuff to do.
Right, thank you. Another question, I think this is personal. A participant would like to know from your own journey on how you led, how you practice leading self.
Oh, I have many examples. I was once, and I can take a follow-on from the question that was just asked. I remember at a point in my career, I was feeling very bored. I felt like I was doing more of the same. I felt, honestly, that I was ready to leave my job and leave the company that I worked in. I worked in the local office, the local geography, and there I found that even though I asked, people were not very forthcoming. I was not getting much attention. People were like, I'm stuck. Oh, you are having some sort of an existential crisis. Don't worry, you'll get over this. And I was like, listen, I need to do something that really challenges me. And if you don't, I'll be forced to leave. And I love this company. I don't want to leave. So part of leading self was I really struggled and said, I can't come up with anything myself. Nobody is helping me here. So I went back to think about who are the other people who I've worked with in this firm, who I'd love to do something with, who will pay attention to me and be able to help me out in this situation. So I called one of my mentors who I had not worked with for years, who was in another geography in the same company. And I said, listen, this is how I'm feeling. Is there anything I can do with you that would keep me excited and engaged? Because I know that whatever you give me, I'll be very excited to work with you. It'll revive me and rejuvenate me. And sure enough, that reaching out helped. He asked me to work on a project with him, which actually led me to do all of my work on leadership. Till then, I had never really done work on leadership development. He was already working on something called habits of mind. And it was a new term. I had never heard of it. He was interviewing lots of CEOs and so on to understand leadership skills. And so I got involved in that project, and that changed my life. So leading self is often about understanding where you are, understanding your context, and then saying, what am I going to do about it? But a more trivial example of leading self is that I thought I always fancied myself as a good writer. I was very good in English in school and college. I was the editor of my school magazine, my college magazine. I had a career as a researcher and did my PhD. I published academic papers in top journals. I always thought writing was my forte. And when I went into the world of business, I suddenly realized that people were actually rejecting my writing and almost treating me like I didn't know how to write. And I was like, how did this happen? So one of my managers actually was very good. He gave me the feedback and he told me what was wrong with my writing. And then I was really worried because I didn't know how I was going to be able to fix it. And you've had I was almost in my 30s by then, and to now think about doing writing and thinking really in a different way was very difficult. So I started to ask other people who were who had gone through something similar, and they said the only way to do this is to get a writing coach. Now, where do I go get a writing coach? But as it turns out, in my organization, they had these communication experts. These were people who used to help put together reports and, when these research reports, which were tomes and tomes of writing, which, people in regular roles were not typical writers. So I went to one of the persons who's coincidentally had her office right next to me. And I literally said, listen, you have to please help me get over my hang up about being able to switch. I'm just not able to switch, and I'm not able to get this. How do you write this way? This feels so unnatural to me. And I have to tell you that she said, from now on, why don't you try and show me everything that you write? I said, what do you mean everything? She said, everything. And she, I would literally take my emails to her before I sent them out. And it was very easy because in those days I was sitting next to her in the office. So I would just go around. Every document that I would write, I would budget time for her to go through it before I sent it out. And in those days, we would have printouts. You can't work collaboratively on documents like you can today on a Google Docs or a SharePoint. And I would literally print out, give it to her, and she would mark it out in red ink and hand it back to me. And I would then follow what she was doing and started to learn from that. Wherever I would not understand, I would go back to her. And that's how I learned a whole new way of writing. So leading self is really about constantly looking at what are things that you're not doing well, and literally saying, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to work on it. Like I'll try and improve. It's equally about saying, what are my good points? What are my strengths? I realized that I was very good at dealing with older people. I also realized that, with difficult situations and conflict situations, I was able to deal with it. I was a little bit, I'm scared of them like everybody is. You don't like conflict. But equally, I found that somewhere, because of my listening capabilities and my ability to not lose my cool and not get emotionally charged, I was able to navigate those situations better. So I then would throw myself into those situations and volunteer to tackle them. And people would often say, why are you taking this on? You are a sucker for pain. And I would say, no, I'm not. I think this is a key skill, and I want to develop it and be stronger at it. So yeah, that's what leading self is really about. And that's how I've built the habit of constantly challenging myself to do better.
We have another question. We've answered part of it. So how important is it to have your leadership skills validated by others? Is there a personal story you would like to share here?
I think you have to always have your leadership skills validated by others, because leadership by definition is about leading with respect to what? With respect to others. If others don't see you lead, you can keep claiming you are a leader or that you are leading, but you're not. So you don't have to constantly seek validation. You don't have to say, oh, am I a leader? Am I a leader? Am I a leader or not? But you do have to say, you have to constantly assess whether, what do people think of your ability to deliver things? Did you deliver or not? Did you deliver to their satisfaction or not? Did you over deliver or not? Did you make sure that you met their expectations. You can only do that by checking. So it's not to be anxious or paranoid or be insecure about it, but it's also to say, listen, how am I doing? The best people I've worked with are constantly in this mode of saying, what do you think of this work? Or how do you think I did there? Can you tell me what you think I did well and what I didn't do well? Again, you don't have to be paranoid about it. You don't have to keep pestering people. Sometimes people like to show that they are constantly getting validation. And that's not good either, because it becomes a bit gimmicky. Again, checking with your subordinates every so often, setting up a cadence on your team to say, hey, how are we doing as a team? Is there anything I could be doing differently? So I think, yes, I think leadership is all about getting validation by others, but in the best possible way, not in an insecure way, not saying, oh, I have to constantly worry about what others will think. That's almost paralyzing. Equally, you see people who are all talk, who are all PPT, right? They'll do wonderful presentations, they'll talk a lot, they'll talk very glibly, and they're great communicators. They take credit for everything and make everything look beautiful and hunky-dory. But sooner or later, people will realize that they are not authentic and that they are not for real. So I do think that it's important to constantly get feedback, genuine feedback on all these three dimensions: leading performance, leading others, leading self. And it's only through feedback that you can actually build your leadership skills. There's only so much you can be self-aware about. Some of you may have heard about the Johari window, which is really about blind spots. We all have blind spots. We all say, do, behave in ways that we can't see. It's only when you ask somebody else that they will tell you how you are coming across and what you need to change.
There's one more question. So hello, Pramath sir. I'm sure you must have come across and hired several leaders. Keeping Harappa education in view, what are the things that stood out to you in your recent leadership hire?
Oh, I'm consistent about my assessment of people. I'm always assessing people on performance, their ability to lead others, and their ability to lead themselves. So what stands out often is, for me, small things. Somebody is a fresh hire from college. Now, how do you assess their leadership skills? You find out that they were the president of their college literary society. So recently, I recruited somebody who started a Hindi debating society at a US university. And not only did they create this Hindi debating society, they actually created a Hindi debating competition across all US universities while they were in college. I thought that was a standout opportunity. And I spoke to them and I tried to understand how they did it, what they did, how did they get other colleges, how did they know that there were debating societies at other colleges. And so this whole story led me to believe that here's a person who really did make something happen. And they actually went beyond the call of duty to deliver it. That stood out. But equally, if you think about leadership positions at senior level, and I don't know if you meant that in terms of hiring, one of the people we hired at a senior leadership level that has been one of our most successful hires was somebody who came across as a person who really listened well. And it was very clear that this is a person who had developed an ability to, one, read you well, but also make it a point to really understand what you are saying and how you are saying it before coming up with a response. It was also very clear that this person was very thoughtful about then coming up with answers or solutions that were not fixed. They were very good about saying, you could do it this way, you could do it that way. Have you thought about this? And just that whole approach, which was on one hand a very strong listener, on the other hand creative but very open, not opinionated, not trying to impress you with how smart they are and how good they are. And you know how people always say, oh, I've done that before, or I can tell you I did this there or I did that there. And it's not like you don't want people to refer to what they have done, but you also want them to be a little bit conscious that they may have done it in one context, but it may not translate into your context. And so it's important that they understand that your context is a different context. So in the hiring process, I think it always has been very impressive to see those people who of course have a track record, who of course have experience, who of course has expertise. That's why you are hiring them, but are also great listeners and are people who are really open. Then you know that they will be able to make the shift to your context, your environment. And before they start espousing their answers and spouting wisdom, they will be good listeners. They will really understand where they are coming. And that will make a huge difference to how they can add value to you.
Thank you. We have one more question by Aarti. How does one strike a balance between peers and senior management when you represent the middle management?
How do you strike a balance?
It's more on the lines of navigating.
Yeah, I think the way, and I'm thinking about it, it's a good question. I think you have to treat the two of them very differently. I think with senior management, I think you have to be very clear, who are you reporting to and who are you responsible to? Who are you accountable to? I spoke about accountability earlier. Who is really going to evaluate your work? Who are you answerable to for failure or success? It's important to be very clear with that person what their expectations are. Now, it's not like you don't want to report to the entire organization or to entire senior management. But honestly, I have always been very clear. There may be a large senior management, but who am I accountable for? Which person amongst that am I accountable for? To, and what are their expectations of me? And being very clear about what is it that they expect of me? What will be their benchmark for good performance, excellent performance, or poor performance, or average performance? So I think that is how I would deal with senior management. Other than that person, everybody else to me is less important. I will give them respect. I will listen to them. If they ask my opinion, I will be forthright. But I will always maintain a very strong linkage with that one person who I'm accountable to. And I'll be always constantly making sure that I'm constantly updating them on where I am in my performance. And I'm constantly feeding back from them what their expectations are. As far as peers are concerned, I think with peers, you have to, one, make sure that you give them respect and listen to them and be appreciative of their work, be empathetic to what they are doing. But you have to be careful that, number one, with peers, you have a rule that you're not going to talk about others behind their back. This is a huge problem with peers because, peers will gossip and they will want to say things about senior management to you as if you are a confidant. They'll expect you to disclose confidences to them, and then there's a danger that they will go and repeat it outside. So you have to be very careful that you deal with peers with certain boundaries and certain protocols where you don't indulge in any talking behind people's backs. Nor do you do that with one peer about other peers. This is the big problem with peers and so keep it very professional and very clean with peers, even though you may be very close and friendly with certain peers. Be personal friends, but don't ever talk about others with them, because you don't know what will get out. And also, if you are going to talk about others, then they stop trusting you because they worry that you might be talking behind their back to others. I think the other thing with peers is don't take shit from peers. That way, don't take shit from anyone. And sorry to use that language. But if there are people who you feel are not going to be supporting you, if there are people who you feel are going to be undercutting you, if there are people who are uncooperative, try. But once you've figured out that these people are going to be competitive with you or try to put you down or take credit for your work or not help you out, maintain a distance, maintain a safe professional distance. Don't be impolite, don't cut off, be, normal with them, but don't go the extra mile. Sometimes it's just best not to engage with people who don't treat you with respect. So those are some comments I have. I mean, I think it'd be more specific if we are contextual, but one, treat senior management and peers differently. Be clear about who you're accountable to in the senior management. And with peers, maintain a very professional relationship. Even if you get close to certain peers and have a personal relationship, try not to mix the two.
Thank you. We have another question. I came across the AMP program on LinkedIn. What are the outcomes of the program? And can I join the program if I come from social sciences background? There are a few participants here who don't know what the accelerated management program is. So if we can also share with them a little bit more detail.
Yeah, the accelerated management program is nothing but a substitute to an MBA. This is for people who can't commit to doing a full-time 1 year or 2 year MBA, leaving their jobs, moving to another city, and spending lots of money and time on doing it. If you can't do that, this is a program that will give you a lot of what an MBA typically gives you. At least it gives you more than enough of what you need to do a management job well, almost as well as an MBA. Yes, it's definitely for people from social sciences background. In fact, it's more for you than people who come from a business background or commerce background or economics background, because you learn all those things that you might be missing, having done economics only or psychology only. I suspect, those are some of the, or sociology only. The outcomes of the program are that you'll hopefully get a good job. Ultimately, that's what we are focused on. But get a job despite the fact that you come from a social science background, so that your background doesn't become a constraint, that you are able to pivot into something new, different, that is aspirational, and that puts you on a different career trajectory, that puts you in a different orbit in terms of the kind of role, the kind of compensation, the kind of domain and company, and also puts you on a trajectory that is very accelerated beyond the 6 months that you spend with us. So that's really the outcome. We are very focused on making sure that you come back to us 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years out to say, this program changed my trajectory, changed the growth path of my career. That's the outcome we are trying to create for you.
Thank you, Dr. Pramath. I think there's another anonymous question. How do I make a choice whether a full-time MBA is the right program for me or an online alternative MBA is a better one for me?
Listen, when you do an MBA, you want to, again, if you're talking about an MBA and a master's degree, you want to do something which is high quality, but you also want to do it from a place that looks good on your resume. So you want to go to a school that has a reputation. First and foremost, you want to check the reputation of that school. So it's less about online versus offline, but which of those two options gives you an option to go to a better, more reputed brand in terms of the institution that is offering the MBA. The second is, of course, then questions around convenience, cost, time, and so on. If you can't go and take time off from work and move cities and put your work life on hold for a couple of years, then obviously you have to do an online MBA. You have no choice. But if you can take time off, if you can go somewhere and work, then I think that's the option you have to take. It's always better to get that experience. The last thing I will say is that these two factors then become the trade-off, right? Or they combine to help you make a choice. Because you may end up with a highly reputed institution, but you can't go there physically. So you're left with no option but to do their online MBA, which is fine. Equally, you may be able to get into an in-person MBA environment, a school, but the reputation of that is you probably can't, you don't feel very excited about having them on your resume. But equally, you can get something online that has a much bigger reputation, that has something that. So I think that's how you make the trade-off. The trade-off is between obviously the quality of education, the brand, and the convenience and the opportunity cost that you might have of doing it online versus offline. And if none of those work, then you can come to our accelerated management program, which is an alternative, which gives you exposure to everything that you can do in a need for an MBA. And then you can go and do an MBA whenever it is more convenient for you.
So actually the AMP can be a great pre-MBA course to really understand, discover career options, and then later go for a full-time residential program when the time and the money allows. I think we've almost come towards the end of our session, Dr. Pramath. I would like to thank you for your time.
Let's take quick questions about writing. I see there.
Yes.
I want to know regarding your writing skills development with respect to your time and now these days when a lot more technology we have. Yeah, technology is great, but writing is not just about writing. Writing is actually about thinking. So don't make the mistake that ChatGPT will substitute your writing. Yes, it will. But that if you just substitute everything with technology, you'll lose your ability to think. So think of, by the way, reading, writing, and reasoning all go together. So if you read, you will reason better, you'll write better. If you write, you will reason or you'll have to read. If you reason, then you'll have to read and write. So I think it's important to think of those as all three together. By using technology for writing, you actually don't do much with reading and reasoning. And that's a big thing that everybody has to be aware of. ChatGPT is nice and great and can do some quick stuff with it, but be careful. If you write something by own memories, exploring in writing, we need to checking through lead interference by other in. Yeah, I'm not sure what this point is. If it's about your own memories being biased by your experiences, that's fine. I mean, if you're writing your memoir or if you're writing on a point of view, of course it will be biased. I think all you have to do is make sure that you're as fact-based as possible, that you are challenging yourself as much as possible to think clearly, make other people read your drafts and get their comments, get their feedback, and that will take care of. But if you're doing creative writing, then that's a whole different kind of writing. And I'm not talking about creative writing here. I'm actually talking about writing at work. Usually you don't want to be creative in that at all. So on that note, back to you, Tanvi. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the discussion and your wonderful questions, and I hope the audience enjoyed it too. Happy Holi, everyone, and hope you have a great time tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pramath. Just one announcement for all the participants. If you would like to know more about the Accelerated Management Program, or if you feel like you need to understand more, more about the courses and the offerings and the faculty members of the program, please do visit our website. You can also schedule a call, one-on-one call with our career experts with the link which is given in the chat box. So hopefully we'll, be in touch, with the career counseling experts, and, hope to see you all soon in the next session. Do follow our LinkedIn page to know more about interesting topics we have for the month of March, and have a great Holi.